about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they're a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.
States up front. I'm Judith Cranus, a member of the League of Women Voters. Our April 28th primary election is coming up, and this is the election in which the political parties, the Democrats and Republicans, choose their candidates. You must be registered to vote as a Republican or a Democrat to choose your party's candidate. However, everyone, no matter your party or lack of party, every registered voter may vote on ballot questions. And there are 5 of them this year for the City of Reading voters. This year, Berks Community Television and the League of Women Voters have joined forces to provide you with interviews of all candidates in contested races, and we will provide information on the ballot questions. There are contested races this spring in the 9th Congressional District for the Democratic Party and in the 127th House of Representatives District for both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. In each district, all the candidates will get the exact same questions and will have the same amount of time to answer each one. We have done this so you can compare them. And please note, if you are not yet registered, you have until April 13th to do so. If you need more information on registering or voting, visit elections@countyofberks.com or phone our Berks County Department of Election Services at 610-478-6490. And this year you can vote by mail-in ballot. That application is available on the same website and through the same phone number. Now please note that the opinions expressed in this interview are those of the candidate and not the opinions of the League of Women Voters or of Berks Community Television. Our interviewee in this program is running in the Democratic contest for the 9th Congressional District, and that covers the northern part of Berks County. And with that, we're ready for our interview. In this program, we are talking with Democrat Gary Wegman. He has one opponent, Laura Quick. Mr. Wegman, welcome.
Thank you, Judith. Happy to be here.
We're going to start with a series of questions, the ones we usually ask. Why do you want to serve in Congress, and what are your qualifications for this position? We'll give you 60 seconds.
Thank you. I am a lifelong resident of Berks County for 63 years. I am also a working 5th-generation farmer, and I've practiced dentistry for 36 years in Pennsylvania. When I talk to my fellow constituents in the 9th District, the people are very concerned about the need for healthcare reform. It's too expensive. Agriculture is the largest industry in the 9th District, and I've also served on the Reading Redevelopment Authority and Reading Parking Authorities, where we've done brownfields reapportionment plans and redevelopment plans or bond issues to build capital improvements. So I understand the problems from a working perspective as a small businessman in Berks County and in the 9th District. I know where our tax dollars come from. I've started and employed people at my companies that I work at, and I look forward to answering more questions about how we can get about improving the inequities in our society today.
Thank you. Now, what should voters know about being a congressperson? How is it important to our voters?
Well, Congress is critical to job development because we set tax policy and we also determine how funds are spent. So whether we go to war or not in America is the constitutional purview of the House of Representatives. And we need to elect people who understand our history, know the value of the treasure in America, so that we don't lead ourselves into situations like we've done, where we've spent over $6 trillion overseas in the past 20 years, when we have so much need for job training and infrastructure improvement here in our 9th district.
Thank you. What are the 3 most important things you want to accomplish if you are elected?
Well, obviously, healthcare. I want the same thing my neighbors want. We want healthcare reform. We want living wage jobs that are going to require some infrastructure investment. And we want a more equitable distribution of wealth such that our public schools are funded fairly. So I'm looking forward to investing my knowledge that I've gained from working in the healthcare profession for 36 years, taking what I know about starting jobs and starting companies and affecting some positive change in our workplace so that we can bring incentives to the 9th District to start new jobs, for living wage jobs for people that are currently without gainful or meaningful employment.
Now, as we're speaking, and this is being pre-taped, just so our home viewers know that, we are in a pandemic. And I wanted to ask you, did our federal government respond appropriately? And if not, what should it have done?
Well, first, let me start by thanking all the first responders and the people in our healthcare professions that are out there helping to make us safe. Please understand that the public values and respects what you're doing, and we're all very grateful and thankful for your service. I am not going to sit back and Monday morning quarterback. We should have had some efforts better prepared for when this arrived. We knew about this 2 months in advance and were slow to getting our responses up. We also cut funding for our pandemic task force out of our State Department, and that should have never occurred. And I believe that happened after the 2017 tax cut. So there are certainly things, by restoring and fixing our healthcare system, we could do a better job of preventing price gouging by companies that have medications that are helpful to control COVID-19, but they've doubled or tripled the prices of these things because there's no regulation on that. We need to change some of these laws in our country.
Okay, well, you've taken us into the next topic, which is our health system as a whole. Is it working well? Does it need change? And if it needs change, should that be minor tweaking or should it be a major change?
Well, it depends on your perspective, what you call major change, because I don't want to change the way our healthcare providers practice medicine. I don't want to own the doctor's education. I don't want to own the hospitals or the EMS teams, but I think we need to change the way we pay for healthcare. It has been shown that we could save hundreds of billions of dollars if we just change the way that we pay for our services. It's not a socialized healthcare system that I'm talking about. It's a single-payer healthcare system that allows the government to be able to negotiate with the private sector and determine what are fair prices for medications, what are fair prices for services. This could go a long way to alleviating the stress. Nobody should have to fear bankruptcy due to a health-related illness. We have people locked in jobs and locked in states because they can't relocate due to a health benefit. The private industry doesn't need this monkey on their back either. This is something I want everybody in America to have their own skin in the game.
So just to follow up briefly on that, you would change it so it's single payer, so we wouldn't have all the different insurance companies, we wouldn't have employers providing it, it would all be part of a government plan?
Well, I wouldn't call it a government plan. The government would pay for the services just like we pay for public schools and we pay for our military and we pay for our police and first responders. But the private sector is still going to have a lot of sway as to how things actually get done. But I would like people to have the ability to vote with their feet. Right now, if your job changes and you get a new in-network list of providers, you may have to go to a different OBGYN. What's the sense of that? If you're an American, you live here, you work here, okay, you should be able to move to any state in our union and be covered with your health plan. We have people due to COVID-19 right now that are worried if they don't work a required amount of hours, then their health benefits won't be vested in their company. What kind of system is that? You should have health care. I don't like to call it a right. It's a privilege. It's a privilege that we as Americans want to bestow on everybody who lives and works among us.
Thank you. One more health question, and that was the Women's Health Protection Act, which recently passed the House of Representatives and is now in the Senate. And it states that access to safe legal abortion services is essential to women's health and central to women's ability to participate equally in the economic and social life of the United States. What are your thoughts on this statement?
When I hear this question, I'm thinking of something that's a very private subject to the individuals involved with making the decision on this question. And in my opinion, and probably the whole reason I'm registered as a Democrat, is that I don't believe that any government should have the right to tell anyone what they can or cannot do with their body, period. Okay? Now, we have many rural areas in the 9th District, and getting prenatal care and proper women's services and testing, pap smears, etc., are very limited in some of our locations. And so we as a nation have to make sure that we're providing these services for the women in the 9th District.
Okay, let's go on to talk about our economy. How will you work to increase job opportunities for your constituents?
Okay, we've just seen the Fed lower the price of borrowing for banks to almost 0%. The government, which I'm not hearing anybody talk about this, should be embarking upon a public transportation infrastructure investment program larger than we've seen since the Eisenhower administration. Money is so cheap. We can generate a return on that investment of $4 to $1 that's borrowed. This would create living wage jobs for the people of the 9th District. Our roadways and our bridges need it. We started rail in America, but we don't have commuter rail in and out of the 9th District. We need to ramp up our public transportation, work with our airports, help with our short lines, and bring infrastructure investment to everybody in the 9th District. This would create living wage jobs. We wouldn't be having a conversation about minimum wage. We'd have so much growth that the public have never seen since the 50s and 60s.
Okay. And how can we avoid the tariff wars and open new markets for American businesses and for farmers?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm very upset of the fact I'm a healthcare provider. And when I put on my gloves, made in Malaysia, or I put on my mask, made in China, right now we have tariffs and difficulty getting things shipped in for a very crisis. This is about lives here that we're talking about. But we were sold a 2017 tax cut that, in addition to bringing us a 4.0 GDP growth that was never realized, we were told that the corporations would take this wealth and money that they were given as a tax break and reinvest it in America, reinvest it in new jobs for American workers. Where are the companies manufacturing the types of things that we're talking about with masks and gloves? Those are maybe automated services, but in order to assemble them and bring the products to it, these are things we could have done here. But instead, we didn't structure that tax law to insist that this had to be done or you wouldn't get the tax break. Instead, they got the tax break and they bought back their own stock rather than investing in American workers.
In building a vibrant U.S. economy, would you emphasize reforming tax policies or addressing income inequality or something else?
Well, obviously, this is the job of U.S. Congressperson, okay? And one of the things that I think we have been giving lip service to, but we haven't done, and that is to put a price on carbon. But I am for a carbon fee and dividend policy that would lower our carbon footprint by 40% in about 12 years' time, according to the models that have studied this. And what this does is it taxes our fuels at the source, but it gives the tax revenue from that back to the individuals. It doesn't go to government to spend. Okay, so you get this money back so you can afford the higher cost of fuel that you're consuming, but it's going to drive consumption into a more carbon neutral manner. And so I really think this would probably be one of the best things that we could do to help improve the future of our planet for our children.
Okay. Would you favor making any changes to the benefits of our Social Security system or to how it's funded?
Well, obviously, we have to take a close look at how long people are living. I mean, when this was instituted, the average life expectancy, I believe, was in the low 70s, upper 60s. People are living well into their 80s now. So I think probably the best thing we can consider doing is removing the cap on the amount of Social Security monies that are spent. That this cap, right now I believe, ends above 120,000 or something like this of monies earned. That should go without a ceiling, so that if you're working, you're making wealth, you pay into the system. Now, also, there are many people with considerable wealth that are also collecting Social Security after they reach retirement age. I don't have any problem with somebody bringing and receiving the money back that they paid in, but if you have a certain benchmark of wealth beyond what you paid in, I don't think you should be allowed to take more out. So those are two ideas I think that would be helpful. We got to start thinking out of the box on this. We're living longer and it's a great thing.
The United States pulled out of the World Environmental Alliance, the Kyoto Accords. Should we be back in it, and why?
Absolutely, absolutely back into to Paris. We have to assume the responsibility that American economy is the engine of the world, and our decisions impact everything. And we need to own responsibility for what the future of our planet is going to be. I hear people say that they really like the way the economy is going since the tax cut. Well, I ask them, did we stop spending after the tax cut? Because I don't think we did. We're spending at the same levels. So that's not really a tax cut. That's just a tax shift to our children and our grandchildren. Okay? So I want to get to renewable energies, that we can be investing monies for jobs that will give us a sustainable planet. And these are things that we in the agriculture community are well positioned for in the 9th District, because our farmers could be growing energy in some of our unused open space.
What steps, if any, should our nation take to reform current immigration policies?
Well, I think, first of all, I'd like to take a step back and say, we're all immigrants. My ancestors were immigrants here, and everybody who wants to come to America, we need to honor and treat with decency. That's the first thing. I don't think a meritocracy-based system would be advantageous for our country. I believe we're going to need a lot of immigrant support for our economy when I get into Congress, and we can start building and creating new jobs by leading as a nation government in bringing about the infrastructure investments that I talked about previously.
Okay. What kinds of policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our community? And would these policies include the LGBTQ community?
Well, absolutely, including all people, all genders, all races. We have a serious problem with poverty centralized in our urban core and in our most rural areas. And our schools are not funded equitably to deal with this reality. We should have school funding based on a per capita basis, and then additional monies to these areas where poverty is centralized, so that the students coming from those neighborhoods don't really have good role models or resources to go to start working as apprentices and in jobs as they enter the force at 15, 16, 17 years of age. So we need to put resources there in order to be able to deal with this. Our public schools need to have more resources for counseling in these urban centers that have more family disruption, et cetera. I'm sure if you talk to our school administrators, they would welcome that kind of investment in our schools. We have to start taking education seriously. It's the #1 priority of our country.
Okay, and there is a question on that later, so if you can elaborate at that point.
Okay.
But first we'll say, are there specific steps you would take to address inequalities facing women in the United States?
Well, I would pass the law that we have before Congress that makes it illegal to discriminate based on gender or sexual orientation or whatever. I would wholeheartedly support that. And, you know, actions speak louder than words. We need to start electing representatives that have embodied and embraced this type of thinking in their own lives. And if you look at the companies that I've created, from my farm businesses to my dental office, we employ all people from all nationalities, all races, all genders. We need to start leading by example on this.
Okay. What steps, if any, should the federal government take to curb gun violence?
This is a huge issue for everyone, and particularly in the 9th District, because I'm a gun owner, I have a working farm, I have to use my firearm every year. And we don't want to take rights away from anybody who's a law-abiding citizen. But all gun owners that are responsible, and majority of the people in the 9th District agree that we need to keep these weapons out of the hands of people who have a propensity for violence. All the studies show that anybody with a history of violence is more likely to commit gun violence. So we need a nationwide 50-state solution to background checks. This is not a states' right issue anymore. It should be an alcohol, tobacco, and firearms regulated entity where all states work off the same reporting platforms, and we close the Charleston loophole. There's no ability to get a gun just because it's taken more than 3 days in order to be able to get that back. I would also, to get the report back from the background check, we have to have that before anything can be sold. I would also like to add that the red flag laws, when somebody's a danger or harm to themselves, we've got to be able to help them by taking away any firearms in the household where they live until they can prove that they're no longer a danger to themselves or to society. Then they can have this back. It's not taking away their right forever.
Okay. And then I had the question of what the federal government should do to provide an equitable, quality public education for all children, and we're talking pre-K through 12th grade. Probably in the fall we'll have a question on higher education, but for now we're just talking about these. And you had mentioned more counselors.
Yeah, we need more counselors in our public schools. We also need to fund pre-K nationwide, getting students ages 4, 5 to begin to learn how to read and write so they're up to grade level reading speed by the time they hit 2nd or 3rd grade. By ramping up investment in our youth, it pays off big dividends at the other end. I'm not necessarily sure if I agree that we need the traditional 12 years of education. We may need 2 years in pre-K, but maybe 11th and 12th grade for some of our students can go away, and they can get involved in public-private partnerships where they can work in an apprenticeship program or a journeyman program. We need diesel mechanics. We need people who know how to operate heavy machinery, metal fabrication. These are jobs that we need to get the private sector to buy in with and help to get our tech community up to speed for the jobs that we're going to need to rebuild renewable energy in America.
Thank you. Now, our next question was on infrastructure, but you've already covered that topic, so I'm going to move on to what measures do you support to improve and secure elections and voting in our country?
Interesting question. I don't think I would back a mandatory photo ID for election for your voter registration card. I personally would vote for when you turn 18, you automatically are given voting rights in America. You become an automatic voter. You have to choose your party, or you can be an independent. But from 18 on, you get your voter ID. And I would support efforts. We have new technologies now, biometrics, et cetera. We should be able to develop means of being able to vote from your home. Coming to the polling place would be fine if that's what you choose to want to do. But for so many of our elderly and people with illness, et cetera, as we're seeing now with COVID-19, I think the primary election in Pennsylvania should be completely by mail. Okay, we shouldn't have to worry about delaying this. Let's just mail all the ballots to everybody now.
Okay. During the pandemic, we have seen Congress act in a less partisan manner. But for several years, the public has seen Congress as so partisan that they see it as dysfunctional. What would you do to remedy this? And we're going to try to do that in 30 to 45 seconds.
I couldn't agree with you more. We need a unifying candidate, and that's who Gary Wegman is. My opponent, the current congressman, has issued many things in the newspaper, and he's constantly saying that it's us versus them. It's only us. That's who's here. We have to represent everybody in Congress. As a doctor, when you come into my office, I don't give you a form to fill out to tell me what your voter registration is. I'm used to working with people from all partisan stripes, and I intend to represent everyone in the 9th District fairly and forcefully.
Thank you. We have about 30 seconds left if you would like to make a closing statement, but we have to keep it to that 30 to finish timely.
Okay. I have a website, Gary Wegman for Congress, and a Facebook page, and I have some video content up there that really looks more in depth to the healthcare and the infrastructure and the energy questions that are important to the people of the 9th District. Please visit my Facebook page and look at the video content. I have podcasts called Gary Wegman On that you can pull down and listen to things about hemp, industrial hemp, or energy, or rail in the 9th District. If you find that your values are congruent with my values, then I humbly ask for your vote in the April 28th primary. Thank you kindly, Judith.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wegman, for sharing your message with DCTV viewers. And before we close, I want to remind our viewers that there is another candidate in this race, Laura Quick, and I encourage you to watch that interview so you are fully informed when you vote. Thank you for watching Candidate Upfront. These programs are brought to you in the public interest by Berks Community Television and the League of Women Voters, and they're sponsored by M&T Bank. I'm Judith Cranis. Good day.
About 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they're a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.